Welcome to the fifth and final round of the St. Mary's Open. And in this round, I was paired up with Phil, who is a friend of mine from Chess Club. Phil and I have played lots of games together, and there's another video on the channel of a recent game that I've played against him as well. I'll link to it down in the description. But Phil and I had never played against each other in a tournament game before. And the thing is, we've played enough games against each other that Phil certainly knows all of my openings that I tend to play, and he knows a lot of my weaknesses too. So this would prove to be a very interesting game for the last game of the tournament. Let's dive in. So I was playing with the white pieces for this game, and I played e4. Phil played e5, and I went into the Vienna. And Phil and I have had several games in the Vienna opening, and I was pretty happy to see it because he often actually kind of struggles against the Vienna. But as you'll see, he found a way, which is very, very interesting, something to dig into a little bit deeper. But for now, we played the main line, knight f6, f4, Vienna Gambit, and then d5, which if you've seen my Vienna Gambit video, you'll know that this is the strongest response for black, is to counterattack in the center of the board right away. And then I capture here, he captures my e-pawn, and I bring out the queen. And then at this point, Phil actually started to think for a really long time. and that made me kind of nervous because we had played this position several times before, and he always just takes this knight. And that's the main line, and it's a good move. And I was just expecting him to do that really quickly, but he spent quite a bit of time thinking, and I was like, oh no, what is he going to find? I hope that it's I don't know, something unsound that I can punish. But after thinking for a long time, he went ahead and took that knight. And I thought, oh, okay, whew, he was looking at something, but didn't find anything. I recaptured with the b-pawn, and then he plays queen h4, which I don't want to say I've never seen this before because I feel like maybe I have in like one or two games online, but I certainly don't play against this very much. I'm certainly not particularly prepared against queen h4. And it seems like maybe, it feels like it might be unsound, but it's actually a really strong move against the Vienna. And like at the top level, I think black does really well with this move. And so, yeah, this was very much a surprise. And I actually have some numbers here in the Masters database. Black wins 43% of games, and white only wins 14% of games from this position, which is just amazing. But it does accomplish some really interesting things, which as a Vienna player, I'll show you what those things are as we move along. It's a lot of things that a lot of the things I'm expecting to get from the Vienna, this just like nullifies them and actually causes a few weaknesses. So let's jump in. I played g3, and I was pretty sure he was going to play queen e4, and this forces a queen trade. And right away, the Vienna is kind of an attacking opening, and once the queens are off the board, I don't have nearly as much firepower for my attack, right? But I figured, okay, we're going to trade, and then I'm going to put the bishop on g2. And now this bishop is probably going to be strong, and it's immediately counterattacking this pawn. And I was counterattacking. I don't know why I said that. It's just attacking this pawn, just absolutely attacking. I was expecting him to play something like bishop f5 to defend, because pushing the pawn to f5 doesn't really work. But actually, he played, again, the best move, which was knight c6, which counterattacks, now I can actually use that word, which counterattacks my pawn here. So I'm going to maybe win this pawn, but then he's going to win that one. And that's what happened. He took, I pushed d4, so I gain a tempo on this knight, and he moves it back here, which seems like kind of a funny square for the knight. But black has actually completely equalized here, which is pretty amazing. That this weird queen h4 move, and then kind of the sort of main line or top engine moves that both of us are playing up to this point, actually equalizes it for black, which surprised me. Like I didn't think that was going to be a sound opening. I thought that I was going to get some kind of compensation, but yeah, it's totally just equal for black. And to be honest, at this point, I was thinking, this feels a little bit drawish, actually. We've traded off the queens, we've traded off one set of knights, and things are pretty open. Like, it looks like it's going toward an end game pretty quickly. And I don't know. I just felt like probably like compared to how I'm used to playing in the Vienna, this seems like it could be a draw, and it is fairly equal in this case. And not only that, not only do I not have the attack, and also I don't have this sort of really nice big center that I'm used to in the Vienna because this E pawn is gone. But now I'm the one with weaknesses, actually, with my C pawns being doubled, right? And usually that's okay because I have some kind of compensation with like the open F file with the queen and a rook, and I can get an attack launched pretty quickly. But at this point, I don't really have much for compensation, and he's kind of just taken the life out of the Vienna. So a very interesting choice, this Queen H4 move. Something to look into a little bit more for sure. So we continued to develop. Once he brought the knight here, well, first I had to get my bishop back, so a little bit more passive there. And then after he brought out his dark squared bishop, this is another idea in the Vienna. That's one of the reasons why we like this B pawn getting out of the way, is I can attack this one, and it makes it hard for him to develop this bishop. He pushes b6, which causes some light squared weaknesses. Maybe I can get my light squared bishop back on this diagonal at some point. I bring out my bishop, just kind of trying to, well, first of all, develop, and then maybe also damage his pawn structure over here. He moves the knight over to d5, and this is actually attacking my c3 pawn, and so I didn't see much better option than to just move my bishop back. I think I maybe could have moved the rook up, but then it just feels like that's asking for trouble if that bishop gets opened up. So I just moved my dark squared bishop back because it wasn't doing much on this square anyway. He played h6, preventing me from coming back. And finally, I play e4. So at this point, since the knight isn't on f6 anymore, I actually felt like this may have been a winning move, or at the very least that it was a strong move. And because I'm pinning the knight to the rook, and what I calculated was if he pushes this pawn in order to defend the knight, which is what he did, that I can then just push my c pawn and kick the knight away. And I thought that this was just going to be winning. The knight has to move away, and then I can just grab this pawn, and that's with a check and a fork on the rook. And I thought that I found something that wins. But of course, I didn't. What I missed is knight to e7, and that defends this pawn. And so things are still equal at this point. So interesting little bit of positional maneuvering there. I castled, he castled. And now this is like one of those points in the game that I think I struggle with, when I don't have sort of an initiative. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have something clear to go after. There aren't any clear weaknesses in Black's position that I'm trying to exploit. I don't have an attack going. I think I'm used to playing games of chess where I have some kind of attack that I can kind of put pressure on my opponent's position. So the only thing I could think of here is my pawn structure is worse than his. So how can I fix that? And I decided maybe I can push this pawn. I also considered pushing this one, but I didn't see anything good here. Like, I think just takes, and that's with a check, right? So I didn't think pushing this pawn was going to work. And even if it did, it just means that I end up with doubled pawns here. So I thought maybe I can push this pawn. And if takes, then maybe I can get, push this pawn, takes, maybe I can get that pawn pushed. And so now I'm going to end up with two pawns here. And that's a much nicer structure, right? And this pawn in front would actually be a protected passed pawn as well. So that would be good. So I tried that, which is a blunder. And it is a blunder because I was almost right. Black can take. I can take. Of course, he can't take with the knight because of my bishop. But then he plays this amazing move, bishop a6. And bishop a6, there are a few things I want to say about bishop a6. First of all, it's a great move. It hits my rook, so I have to deal with that. And it also prevents this pawn from pushing, right? And, maybe I can go back here with the bishop, but then if he just trades, now my pawn structure is even worse than it was before. So that's that's no good. So bishop a6 accomplishes a few things. The other thing about bishop a6 is I completely missed it. I completely missed that this would be a move that he would have. And if you watched my previous videos from this tournament, I totally missed this exact same move in round 2. In round 2, I was playing, again, the Vienna. It was a Vienna Gambit accepted that time. And I wanted to get, like, this rook was advanced, and I wanted to get my other rook over here onto f1. And my opponent played bishop a6 because they had sort of this fianchetto structure. I was thinking they were going to put the bishop here, but just bringing it all the way over to the edge and controlling a whole lot of squares in my position. This is the second time in this tournament that this move has surprised me and has been very strong against my position. So definitely something that I need to start recognizing when there's that possibility that the bishop is going to move through the fianchetto square and all the way to the edge, and when that can be potentially quite strong. The other thing I missed, unfortunately, which I don't think there's much I can do about it at this point anyway, is after I move my rook to safety, now the bishop goes to c4, and it's forking my pawns. And so at this point, I realize that I am going to lose a pawn, and so I am going to be at a disadvantage. I am going to be not losing, but I'm going to be down material, right? So I actually thought quite a bit in this position. In this position, I think the engine says that black is, like minus 1.6. So black is definitely better here. But the game is not over yet. I'm going to be in a worse position, but let's practice defending, basically. And I feel like sometimes when I do something like this in a game, I end up getting rattled and I end up like having the wrong psychology. Like I can't continue to what? Like I lose the train of thought. I lose the thread. I can't continue to calculate well and to play at my best. But sometimes when I'm down or when I'm playing against a strong opponent, I can really get focused and I can really say, okay, I'm probably going to lose, but let's make them earn it. Let's make it as hard as I possibly can for them to win this game. And that's what I decided to do. And so this time I actually found a really nice move, bishop b4. And it's still worse for white. Black is still better. But the nice thing about bishop b4 is it's attacking this bishop. And so really black's best option is to take, because if they move out of the way, then I'm going to grab that knight and be threatening their rook. So their best option is to take. And now I activate a rook. And this means that they can't capture this way. Or maybe they still can, but it doesn't really work to capture this way because I'm going to get this bishop and still have my bishop, and maybe I have this pin, and there's all this going on. Because I feel like I was calculating other lines where they could take with the bishop. No, I'm sorry. They can take with the knight, and then I have to trade off my bishop for that knight, possibly. And then we go into an endgame where I have a knight, and they have a bishop, and the board is open. So their bishop should be better than my knight. This way, he has to get the bishop out of the way. And so that's what happened. He took with the bishop. And so now these bishops are going to get traded, but instead of just trading them here and allowing that knight to get active, I actually attacked the bishop with my rook. Now the bishop can't move out of the way because I'm going to win the exchange if that happens. But then once he trades the bishops, now look at my rooks. My rooks are really active right now. They're on the two central files. They're ready to get doubled up at any moment. This one is actually attacking this knight. And so despite being down, and I think still worse, still minus 1.3, I have a lot of activity for it. And so it seems like this is kind of a best case scenario if I'm going to try to add complications and make it harder for him to win this game. So he moves his knight out of danger, and now I get a rook onto the 7th rank. And I am just constantly creating threats against these pawns on the 7th rank. And if he ever moves his knight, this rook is going to go onto the 7th rank, or maybe I will swing it around this way and get onto the 7th rank, and then 2 rooks on the 7th rank are quite deadly. So he decided he wanted none of that and brought this rook over to simply trade them. Now, I did not trade here because if I traded, he would get his rook much more active. And so I decided, all right, if you want to trade rooks, go ahead, but I'm going to keep one on the 7th. And that's what I did. And so now still, this is pretty good. This is not bad. I'm causing threats. I'm very active. And despite probably still being worse, it's not as bad. It's like minus 0.6. So it's actually close to being equalized because I managed to maintain this high level of activity with my rooks. But now we're in an endgame. And the funny thing here is for a lot of this tournament, I was feeling like I was getting good positions and then failing to play the endgame. And of course, since Phil is a friend of mine and he goes to my chess club, we had been talking about this. And so I'd been talking to him like all weekend about how badly I was playing my endgames. And now in this game, it seems like he's kind of played it to quickly get us down to an endgame. And I'm like, oh yeah, great. So now we're going to get to an endgame and I'm going to just like totally misplay it. So here we are. Let's see how it goes. I feel like so far I'm playing the endgame pretty well, getting into the endgame pretty well with lots of activity. So he pushes f6, which I feel like maybe something like a5 would have been better because this rook is kind of tied down to defending this pawn, whereas this rook would really like to be somewhere like on the c file to try to put pressure on my weak pawns. But he played f6. I think like one thing that f6 does is this king can now kind of have a little bit more freedom and isn't tied down to defending this pawn, still tied down to defending this one. But I took the opportunity to play a defensive move where I'm still causing pressure, but I'm defending this weak pawn because I really don't want that pawn to drop if at all possible. Knight f8, just doing sort of a reroute, I think, but this I also was able to bring my knight in at this point, and I was seeing, okay, hold on, if I reroute my knight, I can actually put some pressure on that pawn, and it's going to be really hard for him to defend it. And that's exactly what I did. So now finally he plays that so he can get his rook out of the way, but I think it's just a move too late because I put my knight on f5, and it seems like he can defend it here, but then I just move my rook over, hitting this knight, and this pawn is going to fall. And now, suddenly, in just a couple of moves, I'm going to win my pawn back, and I'm not going to be down a pawn anymore. And his pawn structure is going to be just as damaged as mine, and I might actually equalize this. I might actually be able to play this for a draw. So he moved his knight down to g5. I captured here. I went back over to just kind of win a tempo on that pawn, and then I pick up a second pawn, and now I'm actually up a pawn, which is just astounding. Like it's interesting that it worked out that way. And I think just like, having this rook really active and being able to bring the knight in just paid off somehow. And I managed to get up a pawn here. We do a little bit more maneuvering. That rook is going to grab that c pawn, but I figured out that if I play here, he grabs the c pawn right away. Now I can grab the f pawn with check. And then even though it looks like I'm in trouble, I can grab the a pawn and I'm still defending this knight from a distance. And so now I'm up 2 pawns, although it's not going to last very long because, and I calculated this whole sequence actually, the knight comes down here with a check, and I figured, going here is just an absolute mistake at this point because then he's going to pick up my knight. Yes, he is, because the king is also hitting the knight. So there's no way I can save this pawn. I'm gonna, and my king is stuck on the back rank. So I'm gonna move over here. He's gonna take. I'm gonna move over again. He's gonna take. I'm gonna move over and attack this rook. And I did calculate this all out, but I'm still up a pawn. He moves back, and at this point, according to the engine, it's a draw, and it absolutely should be a draw, even though I have a pawn over here. My pawns are far apart, and there's enough pieces on the board that he should be able to just block any progress that I can make. So at this point, I did try for some tricks. I brought the knight, and I thought like if he tried to get his king a little more active, what was I looking at? There's potentially a fork square if he goes here or here, basically. And so I played for a trick, but of course Phil is a very good chess player. He's not going to fall for anything like this. He moves over, and we actually repeated moves once. And I considered this to be kind of drawish. And I also, I feel like my microphone's off center. I feel like I also like, I felt like I was losing earlier in this game, right? And so I had another game in this tournament earlier. It was round 3 or round 4. It was round 4 where I was winning and my opponent ended up getting a winning position and then repeated moves because he felt like he was losing before, and so he wanted to just go for a draw. I almost did that same thing here. I almost said, you know what, I've been losing, I've been down this endgame, I should just go for a draw. But I realized something here, that I'm the one up a pawn. So if anyone is playing for a win, it's me right now. I felt like it was probably still a draw, and according to the engine it is, but something that I learned from a friend a while ago is, like, sometimes in an endgame like this, you can play for 2 results. And what that means is, as long as I'm pretty confident that I'm not going to do something dumb and lose this endgame, then even if it should be a draw, I can keep playing on and look for an opportunity to turn it into a win. So it's like I'm playing for 2 results. I'm playing for a draw or maybe a win, right? As long as I just don't do something silly and blunder it away and lose, which I'm totally capable of, by the way. So it's a little bit tricky. But so I did not repeat moves. I decided, let's play on. Let's see if I can find some chances here. And then he played this move, knight e5. And according to the engine, this is not a mistake, but I labeled it as a mistake because I think this made it quite a bit harder for him to play for a draw, to not allow me to get an advantage, because now I can play rook a5, and now it's getting pretty hard for him not to lose this pawn. He moves his rook back, but then I play a4, and how is he going to defend this pawn? Right? So he threw in a check, and my king went to e2, and then he played this move, knight c4. So this is a blunder, as you can see, but there's a subtle difference that could have maintained equality here. So the issues are, like, right now, since this rook was moved over, there's actually a knight fork here, right? But if I fork right now, then wait, no, if I fork right now, it wins. Yes, if I fork right now, it wins, because that's what I actually did. It looks like maybe it works because then he can just pick up this rook, but I'm actually going to win. So I think it might have been we were getting a little bit low on time and he missed that fork. However, this almost works. There's actually this crazy sequence where the knight goes to c6 instead, hitting my rook. And so I'm going to capture with the rook. And the thing is, if he takes with the rook and I take with the pawn, then I'm going to be able to win. I have 2 pawns. I have a knight. He has a knight, but between my knight and my king, I can get one of my pawns down the board. He might have to sacrifice his knight for one of my pawns or something like that, and then I should be able to win. But in this position, he could take my knight instead, which looks ridiculous. But then after I take with my rook, he's the one who gets a knight fork. And then after he grabs the knight, now at this point, black can draw. Because yes, I have 2 pawns, but a knight can actually block one of these pawns by itself. And if my king starts to come too close, the knight can potentially sacrifice itself for the pawn, and then his king can block or even win the other pawn. And so this is technically still a draw, but really hard to find that in this position, to be honest. And so he played knight c4, and I played knight e7 with the fork. And this is where he resigned, because if we play on and he plays king f7, then I take, he takes, I take. And again, in this case, I have the 2 pawns, he has the knight, but I still have my knight on the board. And so this is totally winning for white. So in this position, Phil resigned, and I won my last round of the St. Mary's Open, which was kind of nice to finish it off on a win. A few interesting things just to look at from this game, though. First of all, as I already mentioned, this crazy queen h4 move, and it seems to perform really well in the database, and the engine really likes it as well. It's actually the second best move according to the database and the engine, second only to c5, which is something that I'm quite used to in the Vienna. People who play black who know the Vienna Gambit pretty well, this is probably the best chance that they have against the opening. But yeah, this queen h4 move, I definitely need to take a closer look at it. I took a bit of a look in the engine, and it looked like probably there isn't much better other than the way we went and to get up to about here. But there may be some tricks that I can kind of dig into and see if I can find. The other thing that was pretty interesting in this game is a position like this where I don't really know what to do. Like like I said, there isn't an attack, there isn't an initiative, there isn't a clear weakness. I feel like in the engine, the engine wants me to just do things like A4 to just kind of get some space and maybe undermine this pawn chain. Or the other move is rook f to e1, grabbing this file. So some kind of just like positional move that just makes me a little bit better than I was. It seems like, trying to do something about this weakened pawn structure, that seems like it would also be a really good idea. But I really need to stop missing this bishop a6 idea because it is powerful. It got me twice in this tournament, as I said. So very, very interesting idea. And then lastly, something I thought I did pretty well in this game actually was starting here in this position. I felt like I'm quite proud of how I played these next few moves, because I knew I was going to be going into an end game after some exchanges with being down material, because I was going to lose a pawn. But doing it in this way, so that at the end, I managed to get my rooks like incredibly active. I think that's what saved the game for me. If I had just, been kind of lazy and just said, like, I don't know, even if I traded that and just like went here or something like that, then I'd have to move my rook and maybe I can get it a little bit active. But I don't know. I feel like this just feels a lot better for black. Black can really quickly come and put pressure on that pawn. This knight is in a better position. Yeah, it's like minus 1.6, 1.7, 1.8, something around there. So I'm quite proud of how I managed to play that and get into this position with very powerful rooks. As I said, I think that probably saved the game for me. So let me switch my screen over here and show you the results of the tournament. So it was a great tournament. I had a lot of fun, played some great chess, and learned lots of good stuff that I'm going to take to my future games. My rating did slip down a bit. So I was rated 1683 at the beginning of this tournament, and now I'm down to 1666. I was kind of expecting this, to be honest, going into this tournament, because I felt like 1683 was probably higher than my actual level of play. So 1666, feels a little closer. That being said, I did lose a game to someone in the 1400s, and I also drew a game to someone in the 1400s, and I probably could have had better results in those games. I probably could have played some key moments a little bit better. So I have a score of 2.5 out of 5 in this tournament, but it was a great one. I really enjoyed it. And as I said, I think I learned a lot, which is really one of the most important things. So thanks so much for watching. Thanks for watching through all of these videos. If you watched all 5 rounds, and if you haven't, then you can just check out that playlist right over here. All 5 rounds are in there, and let me know what you think. If you enjoyed this video and if you learned something, then definitely hit that like button just to let me know that you liked it. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think and what you learned, and hit subscribe if that is something that you would like to do. And otherwise, I will see you in the next video. Have a good one.